Embracing your body feels good.
And it's good for you.
This is a podcast for parents to help you help your kids.
To embrace their bodies so they can be who they are in a world that tells them otherwise.
This is the Embrace Your Body podcast with Taran B.
And Dr. Z.
We acknowledge that we are recording this podcast on the traditional country of the Kaurna people, and we pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. In today's episode, we're going to talk about talking about bodies, the language that we use, the things that we say, the things that I was going to say shouldn't, but it's a word we don't use around here, what not to say. And some of the science around this is actually really fascinating.
And this is some of the stuff that we get asked a lot from parents, how do I talk about this at home? What language should I use? And I think this is so powerful because they're changes that we can make right now, today, like as soon as you've stopped listening to this, you can implement what we're going to talk about.
And a classic example was a dad said to me the other day, we were talking about body image, and he said, my daughter came home from school and she was feeling really bad about herself, and she said, I'm fat. And he said to her, you're not fat, you're beautiful. And he thought that he had said the right thing to her by saying you're not fat, but it's actually quite the opposite. And when I learnt this many years ago, gosh, it just rolls off the tongue that they say something, you just want to fix the problem. Yeah. And it can actually have quite a damaging impact, our response to that.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. But I think that we need to address this F word that you've just dropped there, because I think it's something that a lot of people think that they should just ban the F word in their home. And it's something that even I say even I, but years ago when my son came home from, I guess it was like 4-year-old kinder at the time, started saying fat a lot. It just seemed like it came out of nowhere and I didn't know what to do. And so many of us have real history with that word, and we're kind of fat phobic really. Deep down it sort of triggers some trauma in us. And so I was just like, we're not going to use that word anymore. We're not going to say it in this house. And then I went on this little journey of sort of asking all of the experts around me, like, how do we talk about this in our house? Should I ban it? Should I not? And I think that, by banning the word, by not saying it, then we kind of give it more power. And the whole idea is to neutralise the word, because everyone has fat. You are not fat or not fat. Like, we all have a little bit, right?
And it can turn that kind of conversation into something that's really interesting about body functionality and how cool it is that we've got fat. And P.S., we wouldn't be alive without it.
But I think, that's just one word, the F word, or fat. And we should all just practice saying it, fat, in different ways, so that it does come out and so that we do get to feel more comfortable with it. Because, we can have fat pancakes and fat dogs and, all sorts of things can be fat. People, we might hurt people's feelings if we call someone fat. I think that that's a good line to draw in the sand and a good boundary. Part of the reason why we know that words are so important is when they do research with college students. These are 20-year-olds in university, and they ask them if they were teased about their weight and shape as kids. And those who were teased by family or peers, friends, are significantly more likely to be engaging in disordered eating behaviours. So we know that this sort of commentary, these sorts of labels can really cut deep and stay that way for a long time.
Yeah, and the whole, it's just a joke. I can still remember the stuff that I was teased about when I was a kid. It still lives with me now and it still triggers me now. Yeah. And I know a whole bunch of my friends and I have had the conversations about the jokes and it's not just a joke. And I think as parents, we need to remind ourselves of some of those feelings so we don't allow it to happen in our homes.
Yeah.
Some things are just not jokes.
Yeah, and it's really hard to jump on those things sometimes, particularly if it is just a joke. But I think that we really need to sort of shift into serious mode and be like, no, actually, you weren't joking. That's just your excuse. And you were trying to hurt their feelings. And that's not okay here. And I really like that idea of having some sort of family agreement or some sort of rule or boundary around that we don't make jokes about each other's appearance, or we don't criticise or talk about each other's appearance, just like we wouldn't talk about some other things that are, out of bounds or whatever.
Absolutely.
So there is that kind of teasing that happens. And we now, I guess, we call it body shaming because kids aren't sort of saying that they've been teased anymore. They're saying that there's been body shaming happening. So there is that kind of obvious talk. But even some of the non-obvious things, like criticising your own body in order to, do that self-deprecating thing that we particularly do in Australia, but it's a phenomenon around the world called fat talk, is really sort of criticising your own body sort of in an effort to gain some positive reinforcement from the people around you, really.
Some reassurance.
That's it. When we say those sorts of things in that peer group, what that's doing is really setting the standard for what we think is acceptable and not acceptable. And it's kind of, when people talk about societal standards, that's where they come from, is all of that talk, particularly when there's little smaller ears listening, and then we've just passed it on to the next generation.
Yeah, and I remember that being one of the things that happened when I was doing the bodybuilding competition all those years ago. Even saying those words is weird for me. It's like what lifetime was that? Yeah. But I did, and I lost a bunch of weight. And I remember walking through the school with my 3 kids, and this mum came up to me and she said, "Oh my gosh, you're so inspirational." And my first thought is, why? Because I'm out of Ugg boots and I've actually got my kids here on time today. And she said, "I've just been watching you lose so much weight. You're amazing. You're incredible." And I was so perplexed in that moment. I was like, it's weird that you're commenting on this. But I looked down at Michaela and I remember her seeing this woman say this. And I didn't get it at the time because I was on the road to getting the perfect body. So I wasn't who I am today. But looking back on that, I think how damaging for Michaela to see another person making a comment on my body, especially about weight loss, and that it's a good thing. Like, what does that set her up to feel in the future?
Yeah.
Dieting is good, weight loss is good, you will be praised, and you're so inspirational. Like, what?
Yeah, it's really powerful. They learn things from us even when we're not trying to teach them things. And I think that, that's why it's so important that particularly parents stop saying negative things about their own bodies, about other people's bodies, but also stop saying some of those positive things like, "Oh, you look great. Have you lost weight?" Because those are the really subtle ways that we pass on the message that your appearance is the most important thing about you and that you should be smaller at all costs for women.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do I do if my child says something negative about their body?
Usually my response is to just say, approach with curiosity. And this kind of goes for everything across the board, but it's just, why do you think that? Or if they've said, I have fat thighs, or I want to chop off my belly, it's like, what made you think that? And coming back with a question, first of all, kind of lets you get a bit more of the context, but also so much of the time, and this happens to me too, when stuff like that happens, you just panic and you're like, oh my God, this is the end of the world. They're going to have an eating disorder. It's all over. And you sort of start to scramble and they sense that. So I think just coming back with a question of why is really helpful. And so that can be like, how do you know? What makes you think that? And then if it is something, this sort of generally two areas that falls into, either someone said something to them that's made them think that, or they've seen someone else say something, if they've observed parents or peers having that conversation, or they've made a comparison themselves and they've seen something and the message has come to them internally. If it's come to them internally through their own sense that they might be bigger than someone else, or, they're making these comparisons, they've seen something on social media, I think the first thing always is to validate and acknowledge feelings. And then you can sometimes bring in a story from you or others, I understand what it's like to feel that way, basically, is what you're trying to say. And this is something that's really common. We want to make sure that they don't feel like they're the only person feeling like that. And then you can bring in some of your key messages to try and counteract some of the thoughts and the messages they've been exposed to. So celebrating diversity, appreciating functionality, being kind to yourself, and having real role models. Those are the 4 go-tos that you can try to bring something in that might be relevant for them. And then try to prompt them to say something kind to themselves, like they would say to a friend. And that's sort of sometimes just saying, well, if a friend was struggling with this, what would you say to them? And that makes them think of the kind thing in a way that they wouldn't if it's just about themselves, because we're so much meaner to ourselves than we would be to any of our friends.
Aren't we? And it's actually a good one for us too. Yeah. I mean, would you say these things to your best friend? Of course you wouldn't. Yeah. So I'm always talking to people about the most important relationship that you'll ever have is the one that you have with yourself. And it's it's often the one that we think about last. We focus on our friends and our partner and our kids and the dog and the cat and all the things, and it's like, what about me in all of this? So it's a good little reminder for kids to be their own best friend and be kind.
Yeah.
There are 3 brilliant steps that we outlined in Embrace Kids. That was by Zoe Bisbing. Can you just, it's a lot, can you distill that down for parents listening?
Yeah, so this is if someone has said something to them about their body. And I think, we need to imagine this in context as though, they've been injured or hurt by someone else. It's like they've been punched or kicked or cut or something, they've been hurt by someone else. And I think that a lot of the time when this commentary is around weight, we sort of just gloss over it and try to move past it, fix it, all of those things. But I think we need to actually state, like, something serious just happened. And this is what I loved about Zoe's little framework, was it's just like, no, something just happened there, and you don't have to accept it. You don't have to just internalize that and take it with you for the next 30 years. It's like, that shouldn't have happened to you.
Yeah.
And the really important point that I just think hits home so much is there is nothing wrong with your body. And taking the moment to say that can move that on from being a situation where, they've just had that thing that they're going to be traumatized by, to making it something that's okay. So there is nothing wrong with your body, and then prompting with, what would you say to someone else who was in this situation, or what do you need right now? What do you need to hear right now? And sometimes it's just, that they just need to be kind to themselves, or sometimes they need to go for a walk, or sometimes they want to just sit alone for a while, and just asking them to actually recognise for themselves what they need prompts that for when this, if it happens again, that's what they'll then go to as their response.
Absolutely. And sometimes I wonder how life would have been so different for me if I had the champion voice inside my head as opposed to the mean girl. And I think that's why we were both so drawn to doing a podcast and being able to get into the ears of parents around the world, is that here is the real opportunity. Like, this is what's most exciting for us, is that we can help our kids to develop that champion voice as opposed to the negative mean girl, mean boy voice inside the head. Like, that is the opportunity.
It's something that we wanted to be said to us. There is nothing wrong with your body, right? Like, imagine how our lives could have been different. People out there who are listening, imagine what could have been different if, when someone said that hurtful thing to you. In the book, we talk about the daggers. Someone that we interviewed talked about these daggers that are these comments that are said to us, or comments that we overhear from other people. Imagine if someone in that moment had just said, there's nothing wrong with you, instead of, it's okay, we can go on this diet. Or it's all right, you're not fat, you're beautiful. Imagine if there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah, gosh, life would have looked really different. And all of that time and energy and worry and anxiety and all the feelings that went along, right, that walked along the road of hating your body, for that to not exist is like a dream. And we actually can do that. We can do that for our kids. Yeah. I think if, as society, we started treating all of these more like it's a wound, or someone's been cut, as opposed to this, someone has said something bad about their body, because the whole self-love, like, love your body, it kind of takes the power away from what it actually means to love your body or like your body or just be okay with your body.
Yeah, I think we do need to take it more seriously. I mean, there's this kind of misconception, and it is sort of drawn from some of the health promotion messaging that we've been exposed to over the past 20 years. But there's this misconception that making people feel bad about their weight will help them to adopt health behaviours. And it's just, yeah, you roll your eyes, but it's...
Yeah, I'm eye rolling. No, because I'm thinking about a time in the US where they put me on the doctors and they put me next to the surgeon and they wanted to talk about obesity. And they wanted me to become unstuck in the media for promoting us to embrace our bodies. And so thank goodness that there are people like you, Zali, and all your professor mates that I like to tag along with and be smart with, that you now have the evidence that dispels that myth, that if you embrace, you're going to get, even I tried to say the fat word then.
Yeah.
But that's how I'm thinking it through their eyes.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the fear, I guess, from the medical community. But we now have this great research that shows that actually, if you want people to adopt health behaviours, you should just focus on the health behaviours instead of talking about weight, because that's what induces all of the shame. That means that it really is demotivating, and actually that weight stigma is what causes a lot of the health problems, not the weight itself. And that's what the new research is showing us.
And thank goodness you weren't doing these interviews, because you would have been like, duh.
Not a very good comeback against
But you have the backing of science behind you. Whereas I was speaking anecdotally, and I think this is, again, why I love working with you, and that we've come together to take this evidence-based, this science, this research and all the data together with the storytelling, but it's all very factual. We're not saying any of this, especially when it comes to things that people say or promoting self-love. It actually means something if we do it in the right way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just when you try to distill it down to a hashtag that it kind of like loses a little bit of the meaning. But when you have all of the research with the references in there, I mean, yeah, don't get me started on referencing. So I think that, part of this is just making sure that people, when these sorts of things happen, we take it seriously, and try to beat down this body shaming that's happening. But also, I mean, sometimes parents will say to us, like, should I just not say anything at all about their bodies? Like, people get so caught up in the right and wrongness of it that they're like, should I just not comment about their appearance at all? And I think it would be pretty weird if you didn't tell your kids that they were beautiful.
Yeah, that's the road I tried to take when Michaela was young. I actually this is going to sound real bad to tell this, but when she went to have her first haircut, just because I was so annoyed at everyone when I go shopping with her, like, oh, you're so pretty. So when she had her first haircut, I rang the hairdressers to say, and after her haircut, please make sure that no one says, oh, you're so pretty. And I mean, insert eye roll here, right? Yeah. I think that's what we want to do sometimes as parents. We want to control all of these situations and just make it all okay and put them in a bubble, because it is really scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, we don't have to put them in the bubble, and they do need to hear that they are beautiful, or that they, that they look special today, or that haircut, did make them look good. And they do need to feel that on the inside, as long as it's not the only thing that we're complimenting them about. And I think it's just looking for that nice blend. And I think one of the really helpful switches for me is, in general, when we're praising our kids, it should be about the process and not the product. And I think we can apply that here too. So instead of saying that painting is incredible, or yeah, you got an A on the test, it's about like, oh, you must have worked really hard in order to get that grade, or I really love how you've used those colours and brought that together. That's a really unique piece. So you're commenting on and praising the personality traits and the hard work that's gone into something, rather than just what they've done at the end.
And it's a small adjustment, isn't it, in our language? Yeah. For example, if your daughter comes to you and says, do I look pretty in this dress? My response would be, I just want to know, what are you going to do in the dress? Such a small, subtle change in direction, but all of a sudden we're getting her to think about the doing as opposed to what she's looking like.
Yeah.
And I think that's the balance that you speak of that's so, so important. And I think that's where we've kind of all gone wrong, because I had a woman come up to me once going, well, how dare you talk about embracing, you shave your legs and dye your hair. And it was at a Q&A, like in front of a whole bunch of people. I actually thought we had to get security. It was awful. And I was like, well, yeah, I occasionally shave my legs, and yeah, I do dye my hair. But for me, it took a little while to reconcile. What does it actually mean to embrace? And it just comes down to balance, like everything does in life, because otherwise we'd put ourselves in a big tangled web of contradictions too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not all or nothing.
Yeah.
There's a blend there. And I think that we all have our own sort of set of things that we do in relation to our appearance, because it's a big part of our identity, and we have to recognise that. But I think, the same thing goes for when we're commenting on our young people. It's, it naturally comes out of us to say, you look so pretty. And I think that we need to sometimes, just add something onto the end, so that as you're saying, oh, wow, you look so pretty in that dress, it's like, I love how you've put the outfit together, or something around process rather than product, so that they don't just get the idea that they're there for appearance. And so sometimes it's just about making more meaningful compliments. And that goes for the things that we say to our kids, but also to each other as well. And here's some we've prepared earlier in our excellent new book.
We're getting really comfortable with talking about our new book.
Yes, our new book. So things like, I love your choice of outfit.
And you look happy.
Oh, thank you. You inspire me.
I actually really do like the choice of outfit.
Thank you.
For everyone who's not, can you lift your T-shirt up? I want to get it right. So we know how we started the show with talking about the F word. Zali's got a T-shirt that says, I've said the F word. It's pretty cool, Zali.
Thank you. I wish there were more people like you.
You look like you're having fun.
You make me feel so much better.
I love talking to you. You're a great listener.
You have such great energy and enthusiasm.
Thanks so much for helping me. You're so great at that.
You're so good at giving compliments.
Good way to end. Oh, but can we just touch on that? Because I actually think when you expand your breadth of knowledge of how to give a compliment other than just the usual, you're looking hot, or you're looking smoking, you're looking pretty, or whatever they all are. Yeah. Even just amongst my friends, it just feels so much lovelier to comment on other things.
I'm feeling pretty good right now, actually.
Oh, yeah, me too.
And the kids in the film had a lot to say about the way that we talk about bodies and the compliments that we give each other, and that the conversation that they hear as well, didn't they?
Yeah, I remember DJ, and I wrote this down because I wanted to get it right because it is a quote from him. And he was saying it affects children as well as adults when they say negative things about their bodies. Children take that on from their parents. When parents say, oh, my arms are too fat or my legs are too skinny, children think that as well. And they think, oh, I have to look like what mum looks like because mum's always right. I always laughed at that because DJ still thinks that his mum is always right. DJ's mum, just a personal note from you, enjoy these times. Yeah. It's not always going to be this way. But how beautiful that, and how poignant and how, almost it broke my heart to put that in the film because it was a really call to action for parents to wake up because kids are listening. And we've just got to be a little bit careful. And Tanu went on to say, I'm going to be an adult soon, which is hilarious because Tanu's 9. And then he goes, but not soon, but like in a couple of years. And I don't want to deal with all the stuff that adults are already dealing with. Like, I don't want to shame myself for my body. They had so many things to say that as
so good.
Yeah, the inner child in me was like, oh my gosh, I wish I had some of their insights. And then the parent in me went, oh, there's real hope here. Yeah.
And I just wonder if we can keep them like that. You know, if we can keep them, help them to hold on to that.
Yeah. And I wholeheartedly believe that we can. The road won't be smooth or linear, but at least we can help them build a foundation to know that their only worth is not just in how they look, but it's all the things that they do in the world.
So we've talked through a lot in this episode because there's a lot to get through. This comes up so much in regular life in our homes. There's, body shaming, there's teasing between siblings, there's the sorts of things that we go to say about our bodies in front of our kids and with our friends and all of that sort of thing. This comes up a lot.
It sure does. And I think it's good for everybody to know that there's no coulds or shoulds. We're all just doing the best that we can.
Yeah. I mean, it comes up a lot, so you've got another chance coming. For more information, get your hands on our book, Embrace Kids, and for free resources, visit theembracehub.com.